Yes, ma'am.
So what happens if you have a 403B and your children are your beneficiaries and your minors? Of course, does it go into it?
Question asks, what happens if you have a 403B plan and you have minor children and you name them as a beneficiary? You're going to have to get a guardianship to access those assets and actually get them rolled over. That's why you need a tool. Anytime you're leaving money to a minor, you must have a trust available to hold the assets. The other horror story, when you leave money to a minor, the day they hit age 21, it's their asset. And I don't know about you, but it's a horror story. I remember many years ago, my son got $40,000 from a relative. What's the first thing he bought? Car. Yeah, well, I actually went and helped him buy that car. I knew he was going to do it. I said, let's go and buy it. He got a Jeep Wrangler. It was like, but then we saved about $25,000. And I remember this vividly. I was telling somebody a story the other day. We went to Fidelity. We talked about investments, and I thought, gee, I'll inculcate them with this strategy. They'll be young and see this money grow. We go to Fidelity. We pick these stocks and things. I don't think about them, assuming they're going up and away. 6 months later, guess what I find out? Money is gone. He was BMOC, big man on campus, spending the pizza parties for everybody. I mean, kids in their 20s just can't handle it. So my biggest fear is, and I really feel strongly, even before 30, I'm very reluctant to leave kids money. Why not leave? I have an aunt. Her name is Cook. We call her Cookie. She's 4 years older than me. And I had her as my fiduciary, having her look over the disposition of funds. Now, once my kids hit the 30 age, they know what to do, and they can oversee their own dollars. They're in pretty good shape. Other questions? We'll do Ivor and then gentlemen in the back.
So, question for I think many people in sort of university employment and so on, probably bulk of most of their assets are going to end up being in a, let's say, a 403. And at time of death with their family, my wife, myself, the beneficiaries are my children. What are the strategies that would be available to sort of minimize that big tax hit? You talked about
The question is, on a 403B, you want to stretch ultimately the disposition of the assets. And the question is, what's the best way to do it? Well, there are a couple strategies you should be thinking about. One is, ultimately, is having control, maybe rolling it over to a retirement IRA, then maybe changing some of it so it's not all 403B and it is converted into a Roth IRA, which gives you a different vehicle. Secondarily, if you name your kids ultimately as the beneficiaries, it will disseminate to them, but they can stretch it over a protracted period of time. You can also do the stretch through a trust, actually. But with one proviso, unless it's handled correctly, you got to use the age of the eldest beneficiary. If your kids are pretty compacted in age, it's not that big of a deal. I am a huge believer in tying the money up as long as physically possible, just because I'm so concerned about the assets. I also get very concerned, Ivor, about your assets accruing and getting too large in that 403B, because it means, I always call it cruising for an economic bruising. Somebody's going to get hit pretty heavily at the back end. And I believe taxes are only going up, not down. So in many cases, we may want to cash it in a little more rapidly. I do a lot of coordination with accountants and clients and say, you're not using your brackets correctly. You're leaving too much room in the lower brackets. Cash it in and pay some of the tax so that we don't have all this money in, particularly for retirees like you that have so much in 403B programs. You get way overloaded. But it's not something you should walk away from a discussion like this and act on anything that I say dealing with it. It's very complicated because you have to juxtapose the stretchability, the trust issues, the income tax, and look at it all together. But I've had a lot of my clients that have these very large retirement accounts cash the dollars in and not on an annual basis, and put them in Roth IRAs. You know why? Because over in their investment side, they have all these assets earning 1%. So what we do is we pay tax with those assets to free up our 403B or our rollover IRA account from being from the high income tax issues and use the lower brackets. There's a whole strategy to that, and I don't think enough people talk about it. I started out, by the way, as a pension lawyer in my early days, so I have pretty good knowledge of the strategies, but I'm not the income tax person. You must work very carefully with somebody like me or your accountant working together. It's a team effort because the estate planning and the income tax planning are inextricably interwoven. It's pretty complicated. Gentleman back here.
I had a question about long-term care. The companies that offer long-term care insurance have massively miscalculated the risk of the increasing cost of the care and also the number of people who are going to buy it. And consequently, premiums for policyholders have skyrocketed and are continuing to. So by purchasing long-term care at this point in the cycle of learning with the insurance companies, personally, I fear that I'm basically throwing money away. And so I just wondered about your calculation about that sort of thing. It seems that the possibility, many companies have fled offering long-term care insurance, and the premiums for those who still offer it, I just got to notice my premiums going up 85%.
Wow.
So for example, it's beginning to look less and less like a big deal.
Well, the gentleman asked about some of the fragile nature of long-term care companies who have issued policies and now seeing their actuarial calculations go down the tubes. He's correct about that. A lot of companies have vacated the industry. I still have belief in long-term care because even if your premiums go up significantly, the cost is going up so rapidly in long-term care that it's routine for people to be paying $9,000 to $10,000 a month for nursing homes. It's even more costly for home care. It will average $20 to $25 per hour for home care. In addition to that, the highest cost of care that I've seen recently is $17,000 a week. Guy needed a ventilator and kidney dialysis. So that's the backdrop. And what you have to do is really look at your cost, look at the company. I think there are some companies that are better than others. I will say, and I'm not endorsing these companies, but some companies like Genworth and the other one, John Hancock, and just to name a few, have been around the industry for a very long period of time. And they probably have a fairly good grip on it. There's new companies getting in the market. And one of the new policies is a combination life policy in long-term care. For a lot of you that may have your money in low interest rate accounts, I had a client the other day, and we were really balancing, do we get the shared care kind of policy from one of those firms that have been around? Northwestern Mutual is another one that has a very good Metropolitan. There's some of the ones I see in New York Life. But there's now companies that you can take $100,000, give it to them, and you'll get a death benefit back at the end, and you get a long-term care coverage. I think you got to balance out, look at it, look at where your sidebar dollars are going. What I have done personally, I did away with my disability coverage because I'm in my early 60s. It's stupid. It will only pay me for a couple years. I thought long-term care replaced disability, and I dropped some of my life coverage because I didn't need it, and I bought long-term care. So I traded a lot of dollars. In my head, I had a premium amount I could live with, and it didn't cost me much. I just got rid of some things I didn't need. Everybody's got to look at that. I still believe that it's wise to insure that cost, but you just got to figure it out. Now, on the other side of the ledger, I've taken a lot of clients, and we've looked at the strategy. I had one the other day. Nice lady. She just retired from the federal government. Her pension is $10,000 a month. And she says, do I need long-term care? She has no spouse. I said, what do you need it for? With the medical expense deductions, see, what people don't factor in, when you go to long-term care, you're getting your gross income, not your net. Because you get this medical expense deduction. $10,000 a month will pay for her cost of care. So she had plenty of money without touching a penny of principal. So for her, I said, don't buy it. This is foolish. And that's what you got to balance out. I've also had some very wealthy people buy long-term care. They absolutely had no need for it. You know what their response was? I can rebuild my house. I got plenty of money to rebuild my house. I don't want any burden on my kids. I don't want any question. I want to make certain that I got this cash flow. I've been stunned that a lot of high net worth people have bought long-term care. I know it's a long-winded answer to a very good question, but what you should do is sit down, whether it's with your financial planner or the estate lawyer, and really look at it and choreograph what would happen if you need a long-term care. One of the big mistakes people make is that they want all this money for home care. And if you, by chance, were a single guy, it's impossible to use it for, who's going to manage your home care? I get people saying, I care, I want to stay at home. Well, unless you have somebody to manage it, it's a waste of money. Because you're never going to manage your own home care. You may for a short time, but if you're really, you got memory loss, you're going to forget who's even coming in to serve you. I mean, memory loss, my grandfather had it. I mean, the absolute, we've seen Reagan, all these people with memory loss. That's the big issue in society, is memory loss. And you can't manage it easily. And in some cases, I do a lot of what I call WSS, well spouse syndrome. The guilty well spouse Nancy's taking care of Jim. And what do we see happening with Nancy? She's lifting and moving Jim and doing all that. He's a big guy. The well spouse, the minute you get sick, Nancy, what happens to Jim? He goes into care, you go into care. We have to make certain that you introduce help in the home sooner rather than later. Because I've seen many a well spouse health go downhill because they don't integrate help early enough. I don't want to take any more of your time. I'll hang around, take a few questions. Thank you for being a good Saturday.